Recording in progress.
Good afternoon. At this time, we'd like to call to order the Rail Committee meeting for the City Council of Palo Alto for Tuesday, May 12th, 2026. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Lowing.
Here.
Councilmember Lithcott-Hames.
Here.
Chair Burt.
Here.
For the record, 3 present.
Great. So at this time, we have an opportunity for members of the public to speak on any item that's within the purview of this committee, but is not otherwise on the agenda. Do we have any public speakers?
We currently have no request to speak.
All right. Well, we'll move on to the updates on interagency activities. And the first up is Caltrain. Do we have anything from Caltrain today? I don't see anything. Okay, then anything from VTA? Nothing again. And now we'll move it over to our staff. Ripon, you driving this train?
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Ripon Bhatia, Senior Engineer with Office of Transportation. Also, we'll have our Chief Transportation Official joining online today. Since Caltrain was not able to attend today, we'd like to provide a quick update on the safety enhancement improvements that included rail sentry, channelizers, marker, anti-trespassing pads. They are all in place at all 4 crossings in Palo Alto now. So just want to give a quick update on that. For the city staff updates on the Quiet Zone project, we have minor punch list items that need to be complete, and Public Works is working with a contractor to finish those items. Soon after the completion of those items, we will host a meeting with FRA and CPUC for the field review, post-installation field review. Also, we like to note that recently, with rail sanitary system in place, Caltrain had observed the vehicle queues that are spilling over from El Camino Real, Palo Alto signal onto the crossing. And the vehicle queues from that signal is spilling over on at this crossing. And Caltrain would like to have this issue discussed with the CPUC and FRA also. We have initiated our discussions with the Caltrans, who manage the signal operations at El Camino Real, Palo Alto Avenue, looking at some of the suggestions to improve the signal timing and see if we could adjust that could help alleviate some of these or improve the conditions at these locations. For Meadow, Charleston, and Churchill Avenue crossings for quiet zones, we have an RFP already on in advertised right now, so in the procurement process. We are hoping to conclude that procurement during the summer before and then return to the council for
That construction RFP?
No, the design.
Design. Thank you.
Also, to note that Caltrain has initiated the 15% design on the San Francisco Creek bridge replacement. They have kicked off that design, and we'll be collaborating with them on the next steps. And Caltrain will bring back an update at the next Rail Committee meeting. That concludes the staff update. Thank you.
Thank you. Before going to colleagues with questions, anyone from the public who wants to speak on that item?
We have no request to speak.
Oh, we may have one.
Okay.
Okay.
Good afternoon. I'm John Melnichuk, and I wanted to thank everybody here for the teamwork that they showed and professionalism in trying to expedite quiet zones. I'm sincerely thankful for those efforts, and I really do appreciate them. And give gratitude and respect to all of you. And I'm hoping that we can speed this through. And that's my only comment. Thank you so much.
Colleagues, any questions or comments?
Just a question. You said it's the San Francisco Creek Bridge replacement or refurbishment or TBD? Is that?
For now, it's called replacement, I believe. So.
Okay.
So a couple things. Julie, do you have something?
Yes, please. Thank
Go
you.
ahead.
Thank you, Rippon. I think you said rail sentry. Where has Caltrans observed vehicles spilling over?
At Palo Alto Avenue crossing.
Okay,
So-
Palo Alto and El Camino, or Palo Alto and the train. Okay. Vehicles are spilling in which direction?
So for, I would say, westbound or going towards Menlo Park,
Yeah.
and the traffic signal making that right turn for the traffic is held by the pedestrians and bicycle
Right.
activations that goes from that trail from the park side to the to cross the El Camino on the other side. And so that's holding the signal, which brings the queue back
Yeah.
to the crossing.
And did you say Rail Sentry has noticed that?
So they have installed cameras
Yeah.
as part of the rail sentry. And so now that we have 24/7 monitoring
Yeah.
there, so they do have noticed that that there are occurrences of that spillover that's
Yeah.
blocking the.
I'm delighted to hear that. It happens to be the one crossing in the city or anywhere in my life where I have accidentally ended up, because I anticipated the queue would go more quickly and it was held by bikes and peds or whomever up there. I ended up with my back wheels on the tracks when a train was coming and I was terrified and I had to like scoot out of the way. And so the fact that we can now see what is, the vehicular behavior and then figure out improvements to make accordingly is really exciting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Nadia, did you have something? No. Well, just following up first on that issue. I forget whether westbound on Palo Alto Avenue, as you want to go northbound on El Camino, is there a no right on red at that location?
No, it's a signal control. So when the the pedestrian actuates that request, then the signal is given and that holds the line.
Okay, thanks. And then on the San Francisco Creek Bridge replacement, we haven't had any preliminary presentation by Caltrain on what is being considered and ability to really understand the potential impacts in that sensitive area. This is our May meeting, so our next rail committee meeting would be when?
Our regularly scheduled meeting is in September.
Well, not till September, not August. Why not August?
So those are the scheduled month, because July is the
Yeah.
break, and then August is I think the retail committee, and so we kind of alternate with retail.
I think we should talk about whether we should try to have one in August to not wait so long, because we've got several timely issues that would be good to have updates,
Yes,
including the quiet zones that we
Correct.
want to have a full update on.
Yes. Please.
Okay, and then just a couple of the or one item related to the additional security. The anti-trespassing panels are installed at all 4 locations. There is an issue that Caltrain is pursuing with the CPUC to basically enable them to be as secure as they were designed. So there was a requirement by CPUC that limited their effectiveness until that is overcome, and Caltrain is pursuing a either a waiver or an approval. Currently, they're pursuing that right now. Okay, that I think allows us to go on to our next action item. Or...
Yes, we can go to the next item, number 1.
I should have said one other thing on quiet zones. Because of how much focus we have on them, and including after the decision last night to not go forward with a trial closure at Churchill, but in part to make sure that we could have the most expeditious quiet zone possible. Can we be getting a regular timeline update every meeting, and in anytime there's any changes, so that we're just really staying clear on that, and it would be a public document as well?
We can surely do that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, now on to our action item number 1, which is the Alma Street Charleston Railroad Crossing near-term Section 130 Safety Improvement Project. That's a mouthful. All right, welcome.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon to council members. My name is Ruchika Agarwal. I am with the Office of Transportation in City of Palo Alto, project engineer working on the Alma Street, Charleston Road Safety Improvement Project funded by Section 130 funds. Next slide, please. The purpose of this project is to address some immediate concerns, safety concerns that are related to the railway crossing at the crossing of Charleston and Alma Street. Based on the scope of work that is determined between different agencies, the project limits are limited to the intersection of Alma Street and Charleston Road and the railroad crossing and Charleston Road. Next slide, please. To give some background on this project was initiated by California Public Utilities Commission, CPUC. It was identified as one of the locations where safety improvements were needed. Looking at all the different data that they have at traffic speed and volume, the fatality conditions, and the analysis done by the FRA, the Federal Railway Administration. It's a project or it's a program that supports the elimination of hazards at all grade rail crossings throughout the country. This is a project that involves different stakeholders, Caltrain, the JPB, which operates the Caltrain system in Palo Alto in the peninsula. Caltrans is our funding partner. The funds are obligated through the State Department of Transportation in California and City of Palo Alto. This project is limited to the guidelines and the requirements as proposed by the CPUC. We have a short timeline of how we started the project, of how we received the PID, the project initiation documents from CPUC in January 2023. And we had our Palo Alto Bike Advisory Committee meeting last month or March of 2026. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, it's a limited scope for this project, which is determined by the different stakeholders, the Caltrans, which is again the funding partner, Caltrain, and CPUC. CPUC have decided or designated certain work to be done within the city's right-of-way, and certain elements of the work is to be done within the JPB's right-of-way. There are some design considerations, right-of-way being the top one. I do want to emphasize there are no property impacts for this project. Some of the other considerations that we are looking at are existing utilities, visibility, grades and elevation, and bike and pedestrian movements. I just want to very briefly mention one of the other projects that's in the same intersection or vicinity is the grade separation project. It's a long-term project, and currently it is in the preliminary engineering and environmental documentation phase. Next, please. This is the proposed direction right now from the City Council and Rail Committee that staff is pursuing for further. Next, please. This slide highlights the project limits for Section 130 safety improvement projects that we are here to present today. In order to make the conversation easier, we have identified 6 corners or 6 curb ramps that we will be discussing further as a part of this project. This project is limited just to these 6 crossings, A, B, C as highlighted, and X, Y, Z. although some striping and striping and signing improvements extend until Park Boulevard as well. Next slide, please. In the rush to start the project, I failed to acknowledge and mention my teammates here, Marie Mai from Calendar Associates, who would be presenting the next few slides on the preliminary concept designs and next steps. And we also have Jason E. from BKF Engineers and Rafael Reyes from Senior Engineer from City of Palo Alto OOT Department. So I'll hand it over to Marie.
Thank you, Rishika. Good afternoon, council members. I will be presenting over the next few slides details of the proposed improvements. Next slide, please. So the changes near Park Boulevard are pretty subtle. They include the addition of green bike lane markings at the bike lane entrances to improve awareness of cyclists by motorists. They also include the addition of traffic delineators that are similar to the existing flexible posts in the median curb. Next. I'd like to zoom into the intersection of Charleston Road and the railroad tracks and Alma Street. This slide shows the conceptual plan and summarizes the proposed pedestrian, bicycle, and rail crossing safety improvements. Next slide. So talking about the three of the curb ramps that Ruchika had mentioned. So the curb ramps for crossing Alma Street will be reconstructed to be directional. And the three locations are boxed in the red there. The curb ramp will direct pedestrians towards, the top image that is shown as existing conditions. The curb ramp currently directs pedestrians towards the corner into traffic, which isn't ideal. So then with the proposed design, which is shown in the bottom image, pedestrians would be directed towards their direction of travel into the crosswalk. And the curb at the southeast corner will be slightly extended and would result in a slightly shorter crossing distance for pedestrians and improved safety. Next slide, please. And then shifting to the other curb ramps, which would be for crossing the railroad tracks, they will also be reconstructed to be ADA accessible, and they are also dashed in the red boxes. The existing sidewalk grades are too steep, and so the design proposes a new level landing at each pedestrian crossing before the railroad gates, and elongated pathways and handrails as suggested in the bottom image. And that's done in order to flatten and reduce the slope in order to be accessible. We understand the existing handrail configuration is more open and provides for a larger queuing space, but in order to meet accessibility requirements, a longer pathway is needed, and with the railroad gate and crosswalk locations remaining essentially unchanged, a zigzag path is really the only way to create that longer pathway. Note that this does push the curb ramp location at the northwest corner, which was designated as location B in that initial plan. That curb ramp does get pushed slightly to the north, so that would increase the angle or the skew in that crosswalk across the northern leg of Alma Street. Next slide, please. Now, there are existing green striped bike lanes along Charleston Road, but they do not currently extend through the intersection, and you can see this in the upper photo. So the design proposes new dashed green bike lane striping through the Alma Street intersection to make cyclists more visible to motorists in that conflict zone. The bottom photo shows an example of what the dashed green markings would look like, and that's taken from the Churchill-Alma intersection. Next, please. To improve motorist safety at the railroad tracks, a pre-signal is proposed. A railroad pre-signal is an additional advance warning signal that's placed before the main railroad crossing signal. In the photo example at the bottom, the pre-signal is a signal head shown in the red box, and it would be coordinated with the existing intersection traffic signal, which is shown in the orange box. Next slide, please. And the pre-signal is coordinated with the main roadway signal, and it's installed in a location located before the railroad tracks. In this case, I'm describing for eastbound Charleston drivers. The pre-signal improves safety by preventing vehicles from being stranded on the tracks. It ensures that vehicles approaching the rail crossing have adequate time to clear the tracks. So to provide for a little bit more kind of description, under normal circumstances, when there are no trains approaching, they operate together and they would show the same signal. So if the traffic signal shows green, the pre-signal, again boxed in red, would also show green. The railroad crossing signal, boxed in orange, stays unlit and the gate arms stay in the upright position. However, when a train approaches, the two signals would operate separately. The pre-signal will show a red so that motorists approaching the tracks can slow down and stop. And the railroad crossing signal will flash red and the gate arms will come down. The traffic signal would operate separately by showing a green light, which allows motorists who are already in the intersection or those who are too close to safely stop behind the gate arms, they would be able to continue through and exit the intersection. So the intent is to keep the area by the tracks clear of vehicles. With the addition of the pre-signal, right turns on red will be restricted because there is no current right turn only lane. Motorists who want to turn right currently have to wait for a green signal anyways, if they are behind a car that is wanting to go straight. So the delay from the right turn restrictions may not be significant. Next slide. As Ruchika mentioned, a number of key tasks and meetings related to project funding and design development have already been completed. The next steps are shown in the dark green boxes and include today's rail committee meeting and a city school traffic safety committee meeting scheduled for next week. They would be followed by city council approval of the design plans by mid-year, then development of the construction drawings later in the year, and a construction start in 2027. Next slide. And that concludes our slideshow presentation. We'd be happy to receive and answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Shall we go to the public first? Okay, any speakers?
If any member of the public would like to speak on item 1, please raise your hand or press *9 now. We have no request to speak.
Okay. Oh.
John Melnichuk. With this proposed improvement to Charleston and Alma, which is long overdue, is it duplicative and will it be wiped out or wasted, expenditures wasted on the basis of installing quiet zones? That's my first question. And it looks good. We welcome any safety improvements at that intersection, which is very near to my home. And that's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Colleagues? Julie?
Thank you. Yes, Pat, I'll pick up the commenter's question in a way. The larger question of how this project intersects with everything else that's going on. So we have recently completed a number of safety improvements at all four, including the anti-intrusion mats, et cetera. So I'm interested in how any of that is potentially impacted, and I'd be happy to hear that it's not at all. But then we get the question of, okay, but quiet zones coming. How will the quiet zone related improvements in technology impact this? And then the bigger picture, grade separation, or the cost question of what are we spending on this and for how long will it be in place? How far away is grade separation? Will this turn out? If grade separation was to come on the earlier side of whatever time frame we have, you know, how many years would we effectively have this near-term improvement in place, and how many dollars will we have spent on that only to have it undone?
Well, and whose dollars?
And whose dollars?
Okay, I'll start answering the questions, but I will look up to Ripon and Raphael to chime in where I missed it. So in terms of the timeline, what we are looking at is to begin construction in 2027. And this entire project would be funded by Section 130 program, which is a federal funds we are getting obligated through Caltrans, the State Department. The current engineer's estimate for construction is about $2.2 million, which the city would request these funds once we have the GO 88 approval, which is expected in the next couple of months. CPUC and Caltrans staff have already provided us interim cursory review for the GO 88 submittal, but we have not received the formal approval as of yet, which we are expecting in the next 2 months. I'm not quite sure of, I'm not aware of the timeline of the Great Separation Project or the Quiet Zone Project, but it does not impact the near-term Quiet Zone as far as I can tell. But yeah.
So to add to Ruchika is we are making provisions to accommodate for the 4-quadrant gate systems. We have asked the design consultants to ensure that those provisions are made for as far as the location of those 4-quadrant gate systems will be installed. So it will be accommodating 4-quad gate systems locations, not actual the construction or design or any element of that. So this will work together in eventuality when both projects are constructed. As far as your questions regarding the grade separation, we don't have a final timeline for the grade separations, as we would have to go through several steps, including utility relocation, funding, and also right-of-way acquisitions and the construction, final design and award. So that in itself are unpredictable at this time, but we can see that it certainly will have a good 5 years minimum effective time period to be providing safety at this crossing in the interim basis.
Thank you. So who is it's Section 130, which comes through the FRA?
No, it's
CPUC?
a federal,
It's a federal?
another
Okay.
federal entity.
So those people are not concerned that their $2.2 million on a project will be a short-lived project. It's an they feel that the amount of time that this improvement will be in place someday to be replaced by grade separation is not of concern.
Yes, they are aware of our grade separation projects that are in pipeline, and I believe because of the conditions or
Okay.
they feel that the expected benefits are worth the cost.
Okay, thank you. My second question relates to first of all, let me get your name right, Ruchika. Thank you for your presentation. And the eastbound Charleston traffic, so coming out of Southwest Palo Alto, headed east, attempting to cross the train tracks and then go straight on Alma or turn left or right. I am aware when I'm in that line that at certain times of day, peak times of day, when you might have 2 trains coming moments apart, that traffic gets really backed up. And the 2 cars that have made it over, even though they're not supposed to, the track and are in that crosshatch prevention area are the only 2. When the light changes, train's coming, green light, you can go, right? Everybody moves up then 2 cars. And so when we're doing the pre-signal before that, I understand why it makes sense from a safety perspective. I'm wondering from a traffic impacts perspective, what we think that is going to do to the backup if the Charleston traffic can't kind of slowly inch forward with every green light, because we've eliminated and we're really enforcing that and we're putting this pre-signal up so people are much more likely to stop. Are we going to find ourselves with far greater traffic backup at peak times?
Thank you, Council Member. Yes, so an analysis was done, a traffic study analysis by Hexagon, and I don't remember the numbers right away, but I will look up at Raphael to help me respond to this. The primary purpose of this project is safety, and it was recognized that a pre-signal was proposed and is needed in order to avoid accidental or I don't want to use the word intentional, but people who are trying to make the light in order to cross the tracks. So that was needed. The downside is we expect some traffic backlog or some queuing in the peak time. But again, the level of service for that intersection was not dramatically changing. Raphael, do you have the numbers with you? I think we are crunching the numbers as we speak. But yeah, that was definitely a question that came up during our analysis that we looked into.
Hello, council members. Rafael Arias, Senior Engineer with the Office of Transportation. I'm going over the traffic analysis done by Hexagon, and it is showing about a 25% increase in the queue lengths for that eastbound direction, and some degradation of the level service from E to F in the morning and afternoon peak periods. So there is a decrease in service.
Thank you very much.
Ed?
Yeah, I had actually the same two questions, but the first thing I was going to say, and I still am, but you've given us a very nice project to make a decision on, particularly in light of last night's decision. You're offering us near-term safety improvements to Charleston Road Railroad crossing. Near-term, most of the things we deal with here are very long-term. You already got the team together, and you already got 130 funding. So it sort of felt like, where do I sign? This is really good. And then I had the questions. First two being answered was in any way interfere with quiet zones. And you answer that. And secondly, does anybody care, particularly the funding sources, if this is a 7-year project by the time we get around to breaking ground? Of course, it could be 10 or 12 or 15. I'm glad to hear that it's not, because we are trying to get a near-term solution there that's safer, obviously, with a lot of tension and anxiety to get there. So I think this is just, first rate that we've got this here. Just one sort of detailed question. You call it 130 federal funding, but I think you said it actually comes through the State Department of Transportation. Is that just how the money funnels, federal to state and down? But yeah, I think this is, and the 2.2 million that we're getting for that part of the construction is not a massive number anyway in the scheme of things. So these kinds of benefits that we can get very short term for that amount of sort of quote somebody else's money, I think is just very much well worth doing. And I was really glad to see that there's no property implications here, and that we already can spell that out for other folks that have been subject to that level of angst as well. And you've got the data showing that you do have some declining service levels on Alma and Charleston down to F LOS in the morning hours. So that's all. Thank you.
And afternoon, he said. Yeah.
It's F in the morning and only E in the afternoon.
Nadi?
I just wanted to reiterate a little bit about what staff said. This is from the FRA's perspective, they've decided our intersections are bad enough that they need to do these improvements. And so you don't really get a choice. You kind of just get the improvements. So yay for us, as Councilmember Lowing said, because we don't have to pay for them. The degradation of the signal is similar to what probably happened at Churchill. This is already in place at Churchill, and it was an issue that I raised because the distance between El Camino and Alma is pretty short, and that backup impacts the backup on El Camino over where the new VTA bike lanes are. So it should be something that we watch. And what may happen is that we may have to adjust the light at El Camino and San Antonio, or not San Antonio, at Charleston and El Camino, basically, depending on how far back the queues start to get, there may have to be a tweak in the lights because that's how you do it. But this is one of those safety above everything. And so that's kind of how they look at it. Like, sorry, if it's causing you more traffic, we're keeping you safer. And that's kind of how they manage their things. So I'd also say that when it comes to safety improvements, as hopeful as we are that we'll get grade separations and everything as fast as we can, it tends to take longer than we think. And so let's just take them while we can get them. And so that's it.
Thank you. So let me start with that issue of the traffic impact. At VTA, we just have taken action to begin to roll out AI-powered smart signal optimization for bus prioritization. San Jose has already implemented that at, I think, 5 different locations so far and seen real benefits. This is a little different from the bus optimization, but I assume it's a similar capability of the technology. And so if we haven't done so already, I would really encourage us to maybe engage with VTA to understand which technology they're pursuing and what they think of it. Apparently, the VTA staff is fairly enthused, and it's already been flushed out in San Jose enough. And its potential application at both this location and maybe on El Camino, which would, of course, involve Caltrans. But that already must be the case because VTA is utilizing it for their main bus routes, like the 22-522, which is on State Highway of El Camino. So I don't know the exact things, but I think it may be an opportunity to address what's a real problem related to the safety improvements conflicting with traffic. And I believe that, well, we have this other issue that about cars still to this day, even where we've already done similar improvements at Churchill, right? Sitting in the wrong location on the far side of the tracks and even on the tracks. I was there with our new chief safety officer a couple months ago, and he and his assistant, and it was the first time they had visually seen at Charleston, and then we went down to Churchill and then Charleston Meadow, and they were shocked and worried by the backups that were routinely happening of cars there. So these measures don't necessarily solve the issue of drivers who ignore everything we're telling them. Now, one of the things that I believe Caltrain is now exploring is automated ticketing of folks who are violating these measures. And I think that may be important, or we're just not going to get there on compliance. And we can set up well-designed systems, and if people think they can ignore it and they have this sense of need to ignore it to get through because the traffic's so bad, with no real consequence, then we're going to continue to have big problems. I did also have a question. When we put in the eventual quad gates, will the far side quad gate go down simultaneously with the near side, or is there a relief valve that the near side goes down, then the far side, so the cars that are trapped can get out?
Councilmember, typically there is a delay in the far side one, and
Good.
so that there is a clearance.
Is there enough delay? We have liability issues and at Caltrain of strange behavior by drivers that they don't do what everybody would think is common sense. They get freaked out or whatever reason, turn down the tracks, who knows?
Yeah.
So
it will depend on Caltrain's expertise and their design for that.
And the dilemma is, what do we do not about rational drivers and not just about drivers who are rationally following the rules, or those who are rationally not following the rules, But then there's the irrational drivers, and that's even harder to figure out what to do. But I think we have to recognize them. They're real. And I'm not quite sure. I just want to make sure that our design is trying to figure out what happens with the irrational drivers, which is a tough one. Okay. And as Nadia said, this location was ranked high. I think it was on the state list is why we qualify the section 130 so high.
Correct.
Yeah. So just so everybody knows, we weren't just clever in getting the funds. We deserve them because it's a bad intersection. Okay. Then I want to talk on slide 12, if we can call that up. Is that, no, I'm sorry, 9. Let's go 9. And the improvements at Park Crossing Charleston. And basically, we have some improvements on what we'll call east-west bike traffic. But we have a real problem crossing at both Meadow and Charleston, crossing the arterial on bikes going north-south. And this doesn't address that at all. And maybe it's outside of the scope of this, but is staff looking at that issue? And because it's really a significant problem on our whole park bike boulevard. Oh, I see we have a staff member who may be able to help us on that.
Hello, Council. I'm Jason Yee with BKF Engineers. I helped design the plans. Your comment about Park Boulevard crossing in the north-south direction on the plans. With this project specifically, the Section 130 funding is looking to remove queues that may impact the railroad. In this case, a crossing so close to the rail could produce the similar results that we have seen before, which is if someone is crossing, if a bicycle or a pedestrian is crossing nearby, that could actually cause a delay in people exiting the tracks. For example, if you have a large group traveling on Park Boulevard of bicyclists that are crossing, that could stop traffic in a westbound direction and potentially back up traffic into the crossing. So for that reason, we were sensitive in the design of this. I will mention though on this slide, these were the conceptuals that we had. There is a dashed green bike lane through Park Boulevard in the final design to help at least assist in the east-west direction.
Oh, good. Yeah, so I was less concerned about the car backup and more concerned about the bike riders, but both matter. And then my recollection is that our bike and pedestrian master plan does address that issue, but I only have a vague recollection of that. It looks like my vague recollection may be the highest at the table. Okay. All right. And just from a nomenclature standpoint, I've been trying to push this at Caltrain, but we don't have good nomenclature that what I think should be is we call safety improvements those that are trying to address accidental risks, and security those that are trying to address deliberate risks. Of course, you could argue that the security is a subset of safety, but we just haven't had nomenclature that says, what are we trying to solve here? Is it cars and people who are doing things accidentally, or is it we're trying to prevent intrusions into the right-of-way that are to prevent self-harm? So if anybody's got good ideas on that, I think there is a need for us to just have clear communication on what's a term that everybody understands, which problem or problems we're trying to solve through that.
I can respond to your previous comment. This is Ria Hood-Barrett-Lowe, Chief Transportation Officer.
Great.
So in terms of the bicycle crossing, the staff is planning on providing wayfinding at the corner of Park and Mackay, which is just a little bit upstream. And so the idea is to encourage cyclists to cross Charleston at Wilkie Way instead of Park Boulevard. And so I think that will help to alleviate this concern as well, given the closeness to the crossing.
Great. And that seems logical given that they end up on Wilkie to to get further south. Meadow, which isn't part of our discussion, I think doesn't have as good of an alternative street route, but I'll leave that for another day. Okay, Julie?
Yeah, one more thing. Thank you. I know Meadow isn't part of our discussion. And yet, if we are going to be contemplating doing similar improvements at Meadow, the potential vehicular traffic back up there, I think might be worse. I don't have the charts memorized. I'm sure Nadia does, but the difference with Meadow is it ends up T-junctioning onto this strange thing on the west side called El Camino Way, which is particularly on the southern end of it during school commute time, an incredibly fraught road. The road is one lane with on-street parking, it's one lane for traffic in each direction, and the bikes are meant to share the road. And so I worry about that piece being backed up potentially onto El Camino. And in this new scenario where cars are really not allowed to advance one or two at a time with every train signal coming.
Well, and that issue of signal optimization, whether the new capability, hopefully, of AI empowerment, even preceding that, Caltrain has had an issue, and I'm not sure that they've really optimized it yet, of when you have gates that go down, it takes how long for the whole pattern to recover to normal. And during that period, cars aren't flowing through in the most optimum way. And so I think that whether or not we get this AI empowerment, we should be really seeing if Caltrain can support better signal optimization, basically at the Alma and Charleston signal.
I just wanted to add an exclamation point to Julie's point. That's not just a few bikes on El Camino Way. That's masses of bikes. I mean, interfering with traffic in both directions.
They would probably say we're interfering with them.
Well, and in our traffic analysis, this makes me think, as I was writing El Camino earlier today, that right now our bikeways on El Camino are not very utilized, but we are going to be adding at least a couple of thousand housing units on El Camino. Many of them are breaking ground or nearly so, and that will change the biking demand in that area in ways that we may not have included in our modeling. So if anything, we're probably gonna have more bikes there, bottom line.
Councilmember. So one question I was going to ask is, do we know if there's any funding available from the feds for the Section 130 to be able to do the messaging that's needed when such an intersection changes? Like when it happened at Churchill, I was surprised we didn't have one of those informational signs that says like, this has changed, you can no longer stop on the tracks. So while the people are sitting there and waiting in traffic, they're learning like, oh yeah, I see a new signal. Because otherwise, they just continue to do what they've been doing, even though the intersection changes and even though the light changes. And so having these informational signs that broadcast, especially a bit further back, that says, hey, don't block the box, whatever the terminology is for that, might be helpful. And it occurs to me that given the danger of that intersection and how significant the changes, that maybe the feds have money available for the information and education piece that goes along with the safety improvements. And we might also think about, as it gets closer to school, once it's built and school goes back into session, having that be part of the messaging that 25 Churchill and PAUSD send out, that it just becomes something we send out through payback, that kind of there's this general education that, hey, these intersections have really changed. And especially obviously if they're going to incorporate ticketing from Caltrain with the cameras, that'll make it extra exciting, but you'd like people to to do it before getting ticketed. So.
All right. You get enough feedback?
Thank you for that feedback, and thanks for.
Thank you.
Chair,
Yeah.
we did receive an additional request to speak if you'd like to reopen public
Sure.
comment.
Oh. Yeah, we'll take the comment and then I think we need a motion.
Melinda is our next speaker. You now have permission to unmute yourself.
Hello, Councilor Melinda McGee here. I just wanted to follow on Mr. Bird's comment about drivers who ignore and stop on the tracks. And I've been thinking about this as I observe this happening regularly, not even at times when there's a lot of traffic. And I just wondered if with the security that's there at the tracks, if part of the protection is for cars not getting smashed by the train, and whether they could take a picture, whether there's some fine or signage that would say, like Nadia said, don't block the box, that it would be, $500 fine for stopping on the track. So I just feel like we need more information because people are clearly not paying attention. Thank you.
Yes, we need a sign to get them to stop in their tracks. So do we have a motion to?
Yes.
Yes, go ahead.
Move to recommend that council direct staff to move forward with proposed near-term safety improvements to Alma Street and Charleston Road Railroad crossing, including direction to complete final design plans, environmental analysis, project specs, and engineering cost estimates for construction.
Second.
All right. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Lithcott-Hames?
Yes.
Councilmember Lowing?
Yes.
Chair Burt?
Yes,
Motion passes 3-0.
thank you. And thank you to staff for informative presentation.
Might even get that on consent. It's a
Well, it would be, right, by default? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, our next item, while we change chairs, is initial review of the technical activities that informed the 15% design development for the grade separations at Churchill, Meadow, and Charleston. Welcome.
Good afternoon, Council. Good afternoon, Ripon Bhatia again with the Office of Transportation. So we have our transportation officials again joining online. So, and also we have staff from our integrated team, Edgar Torres and Jill Gibson here with the presentation, and also in our audience, Whitney DiGianmesso and Jessica Kulbach. Next slide, please. So today before you, we present an update on the development activities for the grade separation program as we advance our 15% design. And this presentation will provide an overview of the delivery scenarios and that we have evaluated, as well as the key design elements currently being considered as part of the project development. We also will discuss the considerations related to the cost estimates and conclude with a brief update on the next steps towards development of the 35% plans and environmental documentation. Next slide, please. A quick recap for any of our new attendees and those joining online, that the City Council has previously selected partial underpass as a preferred alternative for Churchill Avenue with the bicycle and pedestrian crossing using Seal Avenue and Alma Street ramps option. For Meadow Drive, hybrid is a preferred alternative selected by the council. And for Charleston Road, it's the underpass alternative with direct access ramp. So now I'll hand it over to Jill and for the next steps.
Thanks, Ripon. Good afternoon, Rail Committee. I'm going to continue really just with the summary, and you can go to the next slide, with where we are, and just to recap really quickly, where we've been and where we're going. So over the last year, right, the project developed multiple concepts, several alternatives at each crossing, and at the end of last year, City Council, as you said, selected one alternative per crossing to further develop into 15% design. So we are halfway through this 15% design development. So today we're really going to give you an update of where we are. And then in September, looking forward, we're going to present an updated 15% design here to the Rail Committee and also to City Council to really receive concurrence to carry forward into the 35% plan development and environmental clearance phase. So in that 35% phase, which will run from October of 2026 roughly to the end of 2027, we'll be developing and advancing that 35% design and environmental clearance. Next slide, please. So before we launch into our design update, also wanted to summarize, I think what's important is, hey, what's the focus and difference between 15% design phase and 35% design and environmental? What's the difference? What's the purpose? Really the goal for 15% is to establish a feasible, buildable project concept with a defined footprint, which we're going to talk about in the next slide, to inform the environmental studies in the next phase and get an understanding of a preliminary, which Edgar is going to talk about, cost and schedule. It includes updated concepts, layouts, typical sections. So if you think about a roadway and you take a knife and you slice it down, you would understand the lane configuration, where the shoulders are, and you will understand the typical cross section. You will understand key risks and then also preliminary cost estimates. The final deliverables would include a basis of design, which is really a summary of that criteria, the codes, the standards that would be used for advancing the design. And then the 35% design phase, it really is advancing the design, confirming more details on the track and roadway geometry, the type of structures to be used, a better understanding of the risks, the constructability, in order to really complete that environmental documentation. And the deliverables, again, are that 35% design plan set, the environmental documentation, and then a refined project cost estimate and schedule. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, really the goal of this 15% design phase, and we've talked about it here at this rail committee, is establishing a stable project footprint. And the project footprint not only consists of the permanent improvements, so where the bridges are, the roadways, the utilities, but also the temporary space, right? So the space needed to construct the improvements. So the shoe fly tracks, which Edgar is going to talk about, which is the temporary tracks needed to keep the trains moving during construction, the staging and laydown areas, and the work zones. When we say stable, what we mean by that is a high level of confidence that the overall footprint is not going to expand. So it's the area that we're working within. So after that, this 15% design phase is complete. That's really our maximum footprint to work within during the environmental period as we're analyzing potential environmental impacts. Concurrent to these environmental technical studies, that we're, again, then going to be advancing that 35% design. And so hopefully that helps set the kind of framework of the 15% design goal of really advancing that stable footprint. Final slide for me to kind of tee up Edgar in terms of really what are the key design elements we're going to cover today and what the team, I think, has been exploring to ultimately that get to that footprint is roadway, track, the right-of-way, the utilities, the structural components, and then the construction considerations that Edgar's going to talk about. So Edgar's going to kind of speak to all 6 of these key design elements.
Thanks, Jill. Good afternoon, Rail Committee. Let's dive right in, as we've been doing quite a bit of work as part of this 15% design effort to better understand how not only the design is advanced, how it relates to constructability and the implications to roadway operations, railroad operations, and the community writ large. Next slide, please. The first topic is with regards to roadway and drainage. So this is a lot of what people experience on a day-to-day on dry, but the drainage is because when it rains, you do not want that impacting your roadways, whether it's a lowered roadway and avoiding flooding conditions, or simply the ability to be able to travel safely along the roadway because you're trying to clear that water out. So as part of the 15% design drawings, we have started the detailed evaluation of how the water is going to be conveyed. from these low points, how to be able to bring them up to a conforming grade, or what we say just getting back up to a specific elevation to tie to existing storm drainage systems to then be conveyed to the creeks at either side of these crossings, Matadero Creek and Adobe Creek. Now, because because all three roadways are being lowered, Churchill, Charleston, and Meadow are being lowered, there is a need to be able to, again, bring that water up. Water will go to its lowest point. It will find that space very quickly. And so then be able to pump that out and get it into the piping system. So this is the first stormwater report that's detailing out that preliminary design to be able to understand how far the stormwater improvements will need to occur for the project for each of the three locations. Next slide, please. With regards to the roadway, now as part of the concept refinement, you may recall we had done turning movement analysis to be able to test, not only fire trucks, some of the truck movements as well as trash collection. We did a thorough analysis to confirm that not only local vehicles can make the turning movements, but also at every essentially location be able to handle garbage truck, fire truck, what we call our bus, a standard bus. This is a 40-foot bus, as well as what's known as a wide body 40-foot truck. This is to be able to allow for, I'm going to say, larger deliveries, your moving trucks, say Home Depot deliveries or materials deliveries that are tend to be in larger vehicles, and be able to show how those vehicles would be able to maneuver through each of the crossings. Now, there are some limitations, specifically at Charleston Road with regards to the direct access ramp. The predominant movement for the direct access ramp is private vehicles going from the west of the tracks to the south of Charleston, where a great deal of development is already occurring in South Palo Alto. So that direct access ramp is mostly handling local traffic. And so we believe that there can be a limitation on the 3-axle semi-trailer at the direct access ramp. There are many options for trucks to be able to go onto Charleston, whether it's El Camino to the west or Middlefield to the east. So there's options available for heavier truck traffic if necessary to go onto Charleston. Next slide, please. With regards to the right-of-way, we have some refinement associated with the right-of-way. First of all, and I'll come back to this topic of utilities and where potential utility corridors may be. We have seen, at least at Churchill and Meadow, that the 15% design confirms the previous list of potential property impacts and potential acquisitions. With regards to Charleston Road, there have been 2 parcels that were removed from the list based on the 15% design due to potential reconfiguration of the bike ped facilities and the utilities. So those 2 were removed, and this is at Charleston, correct? So it's one along Alma and then one along Charleston to the east.
Oh, I see it.
So there's a distinction. Yeah, find the difference. So yes, so those 2 locations were effectively removed from the list. We feel with high confidence that that footprint can stay within the space we've identified. The list of potential properties will continue to be refined throughout design. So as more detailed utility design occurs, we'll be able to at least, again, increase or improve the confidence level with regards to the list of potential property impacts.
Just for clarification, is the blue highlighted the complete acquisition?
That is correct. So blue is the complete acquisition, orange is partial acquisitions or temporary construction easements.
And the ones without a coloring along Alma, What are they?
They're temporary construction easements that may or may not be necessary. So that's something that we will continue to evolve. We wanted to at least disclose that there may be temporary construction easements as part of that, again, list.
Thank you.
And that's the key with regards to the environmental documentation process is effectively a disclosure process. So this is what, as part of the due diligence, being able to disclose here are the potential property impacts. Next slide. With regards to structural and geotechnical, so at Churchill Avenue at the partial underpass, the roadway is lowered within a concrete box underneath the tracks with cantilevered retaining walls there and approaching it. This is, and I'll get more into detail as to the methodology, but this is where that box is essentially jacked or it's slid underneath the tracks. And so the example on the right is what the box could look like for Seal Avenue underpass. In this case, the tunnel extends from Pierce Park to reduce excessive retaining of soils. It's pushed through from most likely the park side. And so that box is then able to, again, be stable underneath the tracks and be able to, again, be supported by retaining walls on either side. I'll get more into the construction method here shortly in terms of the box jacking, but we, thanks to the preliminary geotechnical information, so not only what was previously done by the city, we have done additional cores out there and confirmed, at least for 15% design, the bearing strength of the soil, which led to what will be preliminary structural plans. As the project proceeds into later phases, there would be more cores necessary. That's due to when you're ready to construct, you want to make sure you have precise data for wherever there's going to be any foundation so that you can confirm what the design will be and that there's enough bearing strength at the particular location where a foundation may occur. Next slide, please.
So just to make that fast. So basically the soils confirm that box jacking is possible at this level of
design. That is accurate. Now, as to what the support of excavation or support of the jacking, those are refinements that will occur as we get more cores at those specific locations. With regards to utilities, we have not only done desktop research to identify the major utilities, some of it confirming previous work and others new items that were identified. Further investigation is needed. We can say that as part of that desktop research, we also had the owners of the utilities come out and confirm through their mapping where their utilities are. They did not mark them out. That's going to be a subsequent phase. But we have received at least record drawings from the utility owners, vis-a-vis the city, PG&E, and other fiber communication companies, to be able to at least confirm what they believe are assets in this area, the utility assets.
I noticed that this slide doesn't seem to be part of the presentation linked in the packet, just so that we can maybe update it subsequently.
Yeah, well, we will provide an there are two additional, or at least one additional slide, and we will provide an updated edition for the rail committee and the public. With regards to next steps on utilities, there is going to be subsurface utility exploration out at the crossings. So this will involve what's known as ground penetrating radar, where they essentially send sound waves down, get reflected back, and they do multiple passes to be able to identify where approximately those utilities are, with some margin of error both horizontally and vertically. Once that ground penetrating radar effort is complete at strategic locations, we will go back to pothole, essentially dig a hole with water and air, be able to find where that utility is depth-wise. This is to, again, confirm how deep things are so that when we are doing additional utility design, we can confirm whether it's going to be in conflict or not with the proposed improvements. If it is in conflict, we look for your relocation of the utility. If it is not, we look to protect the utility.
Are those procedures relatively new improvements to identifying utility locations? Because I know there's been a problem a lot in the past. This sounds like a good way.
So typically, there's different what's known as quality level of subsurface utility exploration. And in the past, what's known as the higher level of quality investigation gets to be done at final design or even prior to construction. As part of effectively evolving standard operating procedures for design of major infrastructure, we're bringing those high value, typically lower cost activities earlier in the design process. So utilities are an area that tend to have been more of the tail wagging the dog, so to speak, pardon the metaphor. In this case, we're saying, no, bring that effort earlier, be more precise with that information so that decisions on design can be clearer and more precise for a potential contractor.
And to your point that you may discover that the utilities are there and protectable, that's the obligation. You may discover that they need to be moved.
Correct.
Who bears the cost if they have to be moved?
That'll depend on rights and agreements between the various parties involved. So in this case, City of Palo Alto being the utility owner may have an opportunity to be able to do it at the city's cost or as part of the project cost. There may be, in other cases, there are franchise agreements. I believe there is no franchise agreement between PG&E and the City of Palo Alto. We are further investigating that. So understanding the rules of engagement is going to be part of what we're doing in 15 and 35% design.
It'd be great to have a sense of order of magnitude if utilities have to be moved. Thinking about the overall project cost, and if, oh my gosh, we discover this thing is deeper or less deep than we thought and requires movement, is that 1% of the project cost or 0.1% or bigger than that?
Great question. So as we look at utilities and understanding the potential of them being relocated, we actually have what's known as a risk register or risk matrix, where we actually price out the potential of that utility having to be relocated and the probability of that utility being relocated. So that first round of a more detailed quantitative risk analysis is going to occur at the end of 15% design at the beginning of 35.
And since we've got houses on one side and Alma Street on the other, when we're talking about relocating a utility, are we?
It may mean construction of what's known as a bypass or a new corridor for the utility, and then having to shut down temporarily that utility to be able to then tie it in at either end. Very similar to, say, the railroad. You build the bypassing tracks, or you build the bypassing asset of the utility, so that's to minimize the impact to the customer, in this case, the residents around served by that said utility.
Thank you.
And so this information we are considering as a high priority information, both for the end of 15% design and proceeding into 35% design in the latter half of the year. The geotechnical investigation is intended to occur, or sorry, correction, the utility subsurface exploration is intended to occur this summer into early fall. So that would include the ground penetrating radar and the potholing, which will include some form of traffic control or traffic management to be able to provide the space for the truck that does the potholing. We are exploring approaches to be able to minimize that construction impact and footprint related to the utilities, because anytime you bring the roadway down and you need to move the utilities, all that work has to occur prior to the main work of the construction. So it's creating the space for the improvements to be able to take place. There are some preliminary approaches already being considered as part of the 15% design. First is we are looking at a combined utility trench. In other words, where electrical, fiber communications, in some cases a gas line may be in a joint trench with vaults at either end to be able to have the utility owner access only to their particular asset. So we'll be working on that. No utility upgrades except, increased fire hydrant frequency or fire safety as necessary. This is again because we're being mindful that it's been a long time since any improvements may have been made with regards to fire hydrants, and so being able to bring it up to code as part of the project. The preliminary approaches to stormwater management. So this we dovetail with utilities because we need to be able to set aside the space for stormwater management. This is to be able to have the water essentially be cleaned before it goes into the creeks. This is an important requirement as part of water quality in the state. And so we look for ways to be able to treat this water both on-site and off-site. In other words, within the project footprint and outside of the project footprint, but still within the watershed of the creeks. It depends on just how much space we're going to have to be able to treat the water.
Is that requirement based upon water sampling results or just across the board?
It's across the board. So, and the main reason is that, again, roadways already have vehicles that have rubber, hydrocarbons, all sorts of metals that are coming off of them. And so it's implicitly essentially contaminated. And so in this case, we'd be looking for opportunities to be able to treat that water prior to, again, releasing it into the creeks. Again, at low points, there will be drainage pump stations, especially for those deep underpasses to be able to handle water flow. Next slide. Track. So at Churchill Avenue, we can say there's no modifications to the track. This is thanks to the working assumption that the improvements will be done through box jacking at that location. Charleston Road, if Charleston Road were to be delivered on its own, in other words, if there's only sufficient funding for one crossing, and Charleston Road is that one crossing, then the recommendation would be to do no modifications to the track and box jack underneath those existing tracks. If there is sufficient funding, and we'll get a little bit more into sort of the deliver scenarios, but if there's sufficient funding for Meadow and Charleston Road to occur effectively at the same time, then there's an opportunity to be able to raise the tracks at Charleston Road. And this actually can help alleviate some of the challenges at Meadow and the constructability at Meadow. It raises at Meadow, it's 16 feet. And due to Meadow Drive track raise, it can increase Charleston Road up to 4.5 feet. Now, the tracks would be set on bridges over the roadway crossing or a box. So we're looking at both options, and I'll explain why there's the opportunity for either. And then embankment with retaining walls for Meadow, which we had presented to the rail committee at previous meetings. Next slide. Now, there was a question at the last meeting about how the track curves would work. So there's the ability to be able to move the tracks up. So that requires what we call vertical curves. So the smooth transition of the train into a new grade. And then we also have the need for horizontal curves to be able to either create additional space or be able to provide a sufficient space for construction. Those two curve types, horizontal and vertical curves, should not coincide, should not overlap. And so here in the exhibit on the screen is to be able to show at least within where the track improvements could occur, how the vertical curves in orange and the horizontal curves are effectively staggered to be able to provide the space necessary for the tracks to be able to create additional space and then be able to move vertically. And that you can see how that translates into the profile itself. So wherever you see green, there's usually a curve where you a horizontal curve. Where you see orange in the center, you go straight down. You probably see that bracket. That's the bracket for the vertical curve transitioning from one grade to another. But again, we wanted to share with the rail committee how that design came about to be able to get to steeper grades where possible.
Can you remind us why there are horizontal curves there?
So there are horizontal curves for the primary reason is we're going from a 13-foot offset between tracks to 15-foot offset between tracks. And so that is to be able to provide, again, a safer operating environment.
The low-tech version is that the lines of the tracks where they connect is not exactly straight. And so even though on our map it looks straight, it's actually jagged, and they have to allow for that because Caltrain can't encroach.
Edgar, I'm sorry, when I'm trying to make sense of the orange, green, and the red, purple. So I see the vertical rise coming northbound on Charleston from Charleston.
Right.
I see that there's a vertical curve, and then there's a horizontal curve. Then we get another vertical curve at the Meadow Center line.
Correct.
But the train is still going up between those two oranges. The train is still on an upward curve.
It's what we call tangent profile. So it's effectively a straight line between those points. So when we have the straight line vertically, we can put a curve.
It's not a curve, it's just a vertical. Okay.
Yeah, it's just straight line.
Thank you.
So you can apply the ruler there, so to speak, and then say, oh, yeah, needs 2 points. With regards to the red is really the new track profile to be able to show, again, how much the tracks are being adjusted to be able to meet the grade separation at Meadow.
Can you just point out that the Meadow is actually physically lower than Charleston? So the land is a little bit higher right at Charleston. That's what that other black line is. So that's also part of the reason why it goes up more. Yeah. If you follow the black line, which is nested under the purple line, that's actually like how the terrain goes. Right?
Yes. And in fact, if you see the slope on one side is over 1%, and then the slope on the other side is less than 1%, is because we're taking advantage of the topography. So by taking advantage of the topography, the slope doesn't need to be as steep. We did look at opportunities to be able to make it steeper. That is still a potential option. However, those curves start getting very close to one another. Now, one thing we haven't highlighted here is that for horizontal curves, and apologize for getting a little bit more into the weeds here again, steel wheel on steel rail does not move very easily. In other words, you can't just do a straight line change. So, or even go straight into a curve. We have on either side of a curve, we have what's known as spirals. And those spirals help transition the train or the wheels into the curve so that it's gradual till you get to the curb, and then it's able to traverse the curve safely. It is the reason that space is really critical from a safety perspective, and it's highly regulated in terms of how those spirals occur, and to be able to, again, traverse that space in a safe and operate in a safe manner.
And can you remind us whether the constraint on curves, vertical and horizontal, is driven by passenger trains and their speeds or freight trains and their speeds?
Great question. For the horizontal curves, that is determined by the passenger rail speeds. In this case, the design speed is 110 miles per hour. For the vertical curves, those are effectively determined by freight train requirements. And so freight trains tend to require much more gradual vertical curves than passenger rail.
And if I recall correctly, at a previous meeting, we were really wanting to understand what are the permissible freight speeds for loaded freight is, and whether that's the real choke point, right? Is loaded freight cars?
So loaded freight cars are the reason why there's a higher requirement for or longer vertical curves, because as I may have explained previously, with passenger trains, the passengers have a natural suspension. We have a spine, we have quite a bit of control. With freight trains, that's all inertia. right? That's all, there's no protection other than what's in the cars. So if there's any abrupt movement that can lead to a derailment, that's the risk with regards to freight train.
So the question that I had previously was, we have one standard on what freight trains are currently allowed or to operate,
Yes.
and perhaps a different level at what they're functionally operating today, loaded, and a third level, which is what we might at Caltrain be able to negotiate under their track usage rights, which don't stipulate, to my understanding, a specific speed. They have to have a reasonable access. So I just wanted to make sure that those differences are something that we're still exploring.
Yes.
As ways to reduce costs.
So that is something that is still that can be discussed as part of 15% design, as Jill had mentioned. The objective is to be able to understand what that stable project footprint is, so that we can have a high level of confidence we will not exceed that footprint. And so that's the intent here. Now, in terms of discussion, in terms of what's called the maximum allowable speed per the track classification, what they actually do, depending on, you know, either locomotives or their equipment, and then finally, what can be negotiated, that's still something that can be discussed as part of 35% design.
Can you tell us what freight speeds were assumed in these?
50 miles per hour.
Okay. And do we, if you, theoretically, if you had to change and lower the freight speeds, how might that change this design in a favorable or an unfavorable way?
It really, the first thing it would change is the opportunity to be able to adjust the vertical curves. As to whether that becomes favorable, unfavorable, I can't make a judgment just yet on that. But I would say that's the first thing we can say I could say with confidence that if it were to be lowered, the vertical curves would be the first thing adjusted.
And so piggybacking on that, I would say, since you guys are doing corridor wide discussions and you will be building other grade separations, any use of Palo Alto's project to advance standards that might help in that flexibility of design or in reducing the cost of overall grade separations is something that we definitely want to be pursuing. And so to the extent that someone can crunch the math at some point and be like, oh, that really helped a lot. Maybe we do this in other places would be great, because this idea of now, for example, studying the utilities prior and not after 35% design has finally been seen as like, oh, that would actually help. This would be another big place of savings. I'll just leave it there.
Yeah. I'm hearing you say 110 miles per hour for the passenger train.
Yes.
I'm looking at the northbound from Charleston to Meadow, and I'm seeing kind of a wee, because that's, you know, it's like they get to it almost looks like you're at an amusement park and with a big electric train, you know, obviously we don't want it to fly off into the air. And so I know that won't happen, but I'd love for you to tell me why it won't happen. Is there a mechanism that like holds the train down as it's going 110 miles an hour? Or can you tell me the length of the average train? Because I can't remember as I'm sitting there as a driver waiting for the train to go by.
Yeah.
Like, how long is the actual train? How much of the curve of that top mound of Meadow would a single train occupy?
Approximately 700 feet.
Which is what? Tell me.
About 2/3 of that curve.
Okay.
Well, so this is gonna be may blow your mind. With the passenger rail criteria, say freight was not on the corridor. That's not for, but say it wasn't on the corridor, if there were separate tracks for passenger rail, then at that point, that vertical curve could be much shorter.
Wow.
So it doesn't have to be as long. Now, the reason why is, again, it has to deal, in this case, with gravity and momentum, and mostly there's just so much weight on there. And again, what you're looking for is to, getting into a little bit of physics here, when the train is traveling at that speed, your inertia is to be able to continue in the direction you're going, right? However, gravity is in our benefit here on the other side of the vertical curve.
Okay.
So in this case, it just pulls us down. So those have been, designed over years being able to understand the dynamics and the amount of forces that are being applied on passengers or on the trains. And so they're specifically designed to be able to, again, control the train through the track design.
If I could also just add,
sorry.
and this may be obvious, but for folks who may just be casually watching, the vertical and horizontal axes on these graphics are really
Very exaggerated.
distorted.
Yeah.
So the vertical is like 100, the horizontal is 100 times the vertical. So in real life, again, this is stretched out over miles.
Yeah, and in fact, you at a couple of locations in the corridor, there's already one location, I believe, approaching 25th, where it's about 1.25%. You hardly notice it because the transition is so gradual.
It sounds like if it's a short train and an empty train with less holding it. Okay.
Yeah, for years, there's been this claim that if we increased our slope, we'd have a roller coaster feeling, but that's not really the case at this level. One thing I just wanted to share. So our Caltrain operates at a maximum speed of 79 miles per hour, but it has this capability to go higher.
Correct.
Really, the Caltrain doesn't intend to go there, but the possibility, increasingly remote possibility of high-speed rail on the peninsula is really where 110 would come into play. We don't have Lou Thompson here today, who wrote a critique to the legislature on, as is the former peer review committee chair, on the latest business plan, but it's pretty shocking what that plan has. And in fact, the legislature rejected the business plan. But as of right now, that's what we have to accommodate. And can you explain you made a comment that a slower freight speed might help or hurt what we could do on curves. And I was assuming it could only help. So can you explain to me why it might hurt?
So it's actually not whether it's hers, it's what are the unintended consequences. So it's not until it gets investigated that you then see what the potential consequences could be. And so it's like an onion. You start peeling the layer of the onions and just being able to see more and more of what's happening. There is a higher likelihood that it would improve the track profile and therefore make it potentially less expensive. But one of the things that we also are mindful of is we're looking for the ability to build this in a modular way. And modularity likes an element of consistency and being able to hit certain targets, so to speak. And so that is something that we are exploring and saying, okay, the modularity may be designed to this station or this track profile, but if it changes substantially, that may change how the modular design occurs.
Okay, so is it correct to say that almost for sure, if we were able to do that, it could shrink the berm, for instance, the length of the berm, but it could have other negative constructability consequences. Correct. Got it. Thank you.
All right. Next slide, please. To constructability and construction sequence. So the construction sequencing is intended to be able to help support and identify the community impacts as part of major construction phases. These things don't happen in just immediately. It's being able to have, again, deliberate thought as to the space required, the amount of time required, how a contractor is able to mobilize equipment in and out, in materials in and out of the space to be able to build a set improvements. The construction sequencing as part of 15% design will serve as our baseline in informing the environmental document. It is not the construction sequence. It is intended to be a feasible construction sequence to understand those environmental considerations with those for the environmental document. The city and Caltrain do have a constructability workshop this month. We continue to work and explore on the key constraints associated with the construction sequencing. In other words, how each phase of the work could occur, what are going to be the challenges with those phases, and what does that mean in terms of the user experience. In other words, your cyclists, your schools, I mean, Meadow and Charleston being key corridors for school access. So being able to identify for each user what can happen and how to be able to do so safely. Because we're talking about major construction equipment, large pieces of materials, in some cases, large girders to be able to install for the future bridge construction. So that's something that have been developed. Those sequencing plans are being refined and better understood, again, from what we call the unintended consequences and the better definition of risks, so that we can then share that with the Rail Committee in September. And considerations are, again, the user experience. What are cyclists? What are pedestrians? What are automobiles experiencing for each of the phases? The safety associated with the paths that have been identified, how access across the tracks can occur, and both because in this case we are exploring both a shoe fly track or even a closure of roads. So being able to understand how bikes and peds will be able to go through, especially where we're talking about young riders and pedestrians for schools. The vehicular access across the tracks and along Alma Street. And then finally, being mindful of, yes, providing as much time as possible for a contractor to be able to do the work, to be able to shorten the duration. There's homes adjacent to these potential construction sites. So nighttime construction is something that is going to be better understood to be able to then understand, then be able to say what can and cannot occur at night, to be able to, again, reduce potential noise generating activities. Next slide. Let's dive into track shoe fly. So this is the best way I can describe it, is that it's a track bypass of where existing a potential or a temporary track is constructed around a potential construction site and work area along an existing track to be able to build whatever is necessary. So in this case, a shoe fly is necessary to construct the Meadow hybrid grade separation. And so for the shoe fly sequencing, it will allow for reliable and consistent Caltrain operations with larger work windows for the potential contractor, and the opportunity to be able to improve those production rates. So when we look at a contractor space and the amount of time that's being provided, safety is paramount for the rail operations, for the neighborhood, and those workers adjacent to the railroad. So those work windows and the ability to provide them space is really important. Essentially, the more space that safer is provided, the higher those production rates can be. Next slide, please. So there, we evaluated the shoe fly extents for Meadow Drive. And if in this case we wanted to see the larger shoe fly extents, if Meadow and Charleston were to be built at the same time, and see if the shoe fly could be utilized to be able to improve the construction duration for Charleston. So we looked at a shoe fly extent from Green Meadow Way to Loma Verde Avenue. So approximately a mile-long shoe fly. Next slide. So creating those temporary tracks to one side of the existing tracks. Again, those existing tracks that are there today are going to be operating with Caltrain trains. So there needs to be some form of separation from those existing tracks to the shoe fly tracks with a temporary barrier and construction fence. The shoe fly tracks could be constructed. Then you have the supporting infrastructure for those shoe fly tracks vis-a-vis the OCS poles and any maintenance assets. And in this case, crossing equipment for Meadow, because Meadow will be open while the shoe fly is in operation. And so in this case, it shows that there's about 28 feet remaining for Alma after providing the protective barriers for, again, the roadway, the shoe fly, and the existing tracks, as these workers will be in between the tracks and the roadway. Next slide.
I think it'd be helpful if you'd say how wide a lane normally is and how much a shoulder is.
A typical lane, or at least is 12 feet, but it can be reduced down to 10. For fire access, the preferred is 14 feet along a stretch. And so this is what we've be able to at least accommodate. In section, so one thing is to be able to see it in plan view from a bird's eye. It's another thing to be able to see it in section. So I'm going to actually go right to left. So the existing tracks are on the right side. Then you see the shoe fly tracks in the center. And then finally, Alma Street on the far left. And then you'll see the sidewalk and the remaining roadway right away to the left of that. The shoe fly can extend into Alma Street approximately 23 to 37 feet. Now, it seems like that's a very wide range. It's because of the jog in the right-of-way and the transition of Alma's right-of-way width between essentially on the north and south side of Meadow. So that's the reason why there's a larger extent there. So this is to be able to show, again, what may seem like a lot of space when you go when you see the railroad and go out at the crossing. It's actually not as much when you start looking at the ability to be able to construct said tracks.
And the east side of Alma has a very wide planting strip, as well as in some cases a buffer even beyond the sidewalk to the back fences.
That's correct.
Does this include intruding into that?
Not yet.
Okay.
So that's those are going to be opportunities to be able to provide relief. And so we wanted to first explore what does this mean in terms of not conservative, but constrained footprint for the roadway. Now, in that buffer zone, there is extensive utilities on those poles. So those are fiber utilities as well as electrical. And so that would have to be buried and relocated prior to utilizing that space.
Thanks.
All right. So that's in section. Next slide. So box checking. This is applicable to Churchill Avenue, the partial underpass, and then Charleston Road if it were to be, constructed with or without Meadow. So there's several scenarios. So what occurs here? This construction method installs a reinforced concrete box underneath the existing tracks, and it's essentially pushing it with hydraulic pumps, just pushing it at about 1 centimeter a minute, and be able to get it all the way underneath the tracks. Now, you see on the screen an example from the delivery guide. In this case, this is a what's known as a supporting bridge. In other words, you see those blue supporting structures on the other side of the tracks. This is to completely isolate the tracks from the ground below so that when the box is pushed, it's not moving. You do not want those tracks translating, or what we call shear, be able to move to side. Now, the deeper the box, there's a less need to isolate the tracks. However, our objective here is to be able to get that box as high as possible underneath the tracks. Now, there is another jacking method that we are exploring, and that is where what other railroads have done. Other railroads have done this type of box jacking where it's isolating the tracks. There's also the ability, and we're exploring the ability to essentially have some form of shutdown, cut the tracks, dig the hole, push the entire box with the bridge structure underneath into place. And that's been done in Long Island Railroad. It's been done as part of a handful of pre-planned closures at that location. That's another method that we will be exploring as part of this project.
There are some wonderful time-lapse videos on box jacking for the public who might go to this on our website. And I assume these are going to be posted on the
Yes.
Could we link time-lapse time-lapse
Yeah.
video because till you've seen that, it's hard to envision how this works.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So there's in this case, a whole box. There's the ability to just jack not only the box with an open cut, which makes it a little bit easier, less isolating of the tracks. There's also the ability to build the essentially a frame of the box with a bridge on top and push that into place. So we are exploring different methods of being able to reduce that construction period immediately at the crossing and be able to, again, improve constructability and construction timelines.
And I'll just note, even though we haven't done any rail jack boxes regionally, VTA has used it on other, and I'm not sure where, but I know our CEO had mentioned this on other locations on projects they've done in the county.
That's correct. So where the tracks are isolated, it minimizes or eliminates the disruption to rail operation, so you can effectively operate on top of the tracks. If a closure is considered, then there's other ways to be able to, again, reduce the amount of impacts surrounding that particular crossing. So we are exploring multiple options, including whether it's one large box or two smaller boxes. So we're starting to delve into those design considerations and details to be able to see how to be able to improve constructability for each of the crossings. All right. Oh, and again, so if you'll indulge me again, a little bit of detail here. Receiving pit at the other end, it's not just for the dirt that's coming out, it's also for this pretty sizable segment of what's piercing the dirt. Think of it as like almost like the nice edge that's piercing the dirt that then gets cut off. And there has to be the ability to move those pieces, that remnant box out. So we are looking at ways in which this could be repeatable even between Churchill and Charleston, and see if there's efficiencies there. Next slide. So the delivery scenarios. So in this case, we've talked about a lot of the design elements and constructability, and we are going to go into more detail in the coming months with you. So this is the first foray into that. Churchill Avenue, I've mentioned this box jacking, both for the vehicular crossing at Churchill itself and Seal Avenue at Pierce Park. So the ability to be able to build push that box through. I didn't get too much into Seal Avenue today, but we will be talking about what it means to potentially push that box further into Alma, maybe doing some open cut there. We'll talk about some of that sequencing to see how that can get, again, to be able to improve constructability. Now, Meadow and Charleston. As you've communicated in the past, this is highly dependent on the amount of funding that would be available for the crossings. And so we are preparing these scenarios to be able to see how much it would cost to be able to do Charleston on its own, Charleston and Meadow somewhat in sequence at the same time, and then both effectively at the same time, so that we are able to better understand the trade-offs from a cost perspective and be able to present that to the Rail Committee and the City Council. Now, Charleston Road, essentially it's box jacking. It's from a scenario perspective, it's pretty straightforward, and we consider that a good sort of baseline to then understand the marginal cost beyond that. For Meadow and Charleston, there are a couple of options here. So there could be, for example, Charleston constructed with box jacking, get that all built out, and then shoe fly and build Meadow afterwards. That's one potential scenario. And then there's the scenario that if the shoe fly is constructed for both crossings, then be able to take advantage of that shoe fly to be able to construct the the Charleston bridges as quickly as possible for the railroad and create the space for then the roadway improvements. We're also looking at the roadway improvements occurring first before the rail improvements because of, again, the ability to be able to provide circulation mobility for the communities on either side of the track. So we are looking at different scenarios of how these could get built. And then, again, it's all dependent on the funding. And so that's something that we will continue to explore in terms of the ability to deliver if the funding's available.
Could I ask, now that we're at this point and we're really imagining the box jacking here and the shoe fly here, Are you finding yourselves going, oh, I wish Palo Alto had gone with the underpass at Meadow? Like I'm pattern matching here. I see box jacking here and box jacking here, and then this sort of more complicated piece in the middle with Meadow. And I know why we preferred the hybrid. We were trying to minimize property impacts. And, you know, there are trade-offs inherent in all of this. So I'm just wondering, we would hate for you not to tell us, you know, hey, y'all, as we've gotten this far in, what we realize is there's a tremendous cost savings if you go with, you know, underpass at Meadow because we could box jack it all and it would, I don't know. I'm just trying to,
Right.
we want your transparency and your advice before it's too late.
So in this case, one thing to recall is that there were the two ramps going north from Meadow along Alma, one on each side of Alma. Those were pretty deep ramps, and they were adjacent to homes on the east side and the shopping center, and it would require the ability to then support said shopping center construction. So there's some more complexity there. Whether it's again, we could analyze it. I don't think it's going to be as easy as saying, oh, because box jacking is available, it's easily constructible. What I can say, based on what we've dug into more and more in terms of 15% design, candidly, the track or the track portion of the crossing at times is easier than the Alma Street portion of the crossing. Charleston and Alma, that bridge deck is complex to be able to build and be able to maintain traffic on it. So that is where there's a great deal more effort on our part to better understand how that bridge of Alma over Charleston will work and how it will be built. We're exploring different construction techniques for that. We'll be presenting this at the next meeting. Construction techniques for that. What, if any, diversion of traffic may be necessary? Is it shutting down Alma there an option? Unlikely. But we're just trying to see how to be able to provide that space to be able to build what is effectively a pretty big bridge. It's an 80-foot bridge at least. So there's some complex geometry and structural calculations for that particular bridge. Oh, sorry, I do have one more slide. The independent cost estimates and the considerations associated with that. The estimates will include total delivery costs. I can't emphasize the importance of that. It's not just construction, it's the ability to deliver all of it, utility relocations, permitting, environmental monitoring, construction management, noise monitoring. All of that is to be included as part of the independent cost estimate. Property acquisitions are not going to be explicitly included in the ICE. However, we will be able to come back with some preliminary estimates associated with potential property acquisitions. The estimate will be informed by three key factors. First, the work windows and rail service constraints. So the ability for the contractor to be able to perform the work. And therefore, they will be estimating whether the production rates will be what we call sort of freeform. In other words, unconstrained production rates versus, a level of constraint or degradation of those production rates. We are in an electrified corridor, so there's the need to be able to de-energize the OCS to be able to provide, again, that safe space for the contractors, crews, and equipment. So sometimes with these larger equipments, you need that clearance from that active OCS or energized OCS wire. And finally, current market costs. So we've all been experiencing different levels of inflation recently. That construction materials are not immune to that, and unfortunately, conditions globally do impact the ability to be able to acquire materials. So in September, we will be presenting to the Rail Committee a constructability memo with regards to Meadow Charleston. We will be coming back with the construction schedules of first edition of the construction schedules and the estimates based on those schedules. So what type of work is occurring at what time, and then be able to provide a cost associated with that. For the 3 locations for the following scenarios: Churchill Partial Underpass on its own, Charleston Underpass on its own, and then the Meadow Hybrid and Charleston Underpass concurrently as a package. Also, at the September Rail Committee, we will come back with the potential preliminary cost risks. So as you mentioned, Councilmember Lithcott-Hames, there's a price associated with some of these risks. We will come back with a preliminary edition of those lists of risk and associated costs.
Last slide. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Just
Go
one
ahead.
question on the cost. I think you had told us previously that you're still assuming that the hybrid, the width of the hybrid would still be the entire corridor. Is that right? That the earthen.
Oh, the retained fill earthen berm.
Yeah.
Yes, it would effectively be for the stretch. We would be looking at the shorter bridge per the direction of the rail committee at the previous meeting.
And that entire width, is that based upon Caltrain O&M needs or other considerations?
As of right now, it's based on the Caltrain's criteria for full utilization of its right of way.
And so what point in the process do we enter into engagement with Caltrain on minimizing those requirements imposed on the design?
That would be something that can be discussed in its first form as part of 35% design. We'd like to establish the footprint as part of 15%, get that going as part of the environmental review.
Because at Caltrain, I've been pushing for over a year, and we're going to have this in the coming months, is a reconciliation of different Caltrain policies on supporting grade separations, the O&M needs, the real estate issues, and currently, to some degree, those are in conflict, saying that we at Caltrain want to support most cost-effective grade separations, and then we have policies that, in some ways, design criteria that work against that. So hopefully, we're going to, in the coming months, at least at the policy level, say, here's some how we reconcile them.
Yeah, and we always appreciate that direction from Caltrain.
So if I could just touch on in August, the last slide. So the last slide. In August, we're anticipating hosting 2 community meetings at Mitchell Park, dates to be determined, but working closely with the city's comm team and others late August. We'll socialize that date once we have it. And then, as Edgar said, coming back in September to Rail Committee, and then ultimately to City Council for concurrence to advance into 35% design. That concludes our presentation.
Thanks. Well, first, I just want to say thanks for once again presenting some complex issues in depth and yet in ways that allow lay people to understand. And also thanks for indulging our questions as you went through the slides, because it just helps us be able to keep track. Do we have any members of the public who want to speak on this? Yes.
We do have several requests to speak. Our first speaker is Eric N. Thank you. Our next speaker is John M.
Hello, everybody. Mr. Torres, that was terrific. I learned a lot today, and also for the Rail Committee. And Nadia, the questions you asked answered a lot of questions and concerns that I had. Can we go back to slide 17? Please, is that possible? So for me, I live very near to the railway. And I'm just living here. Just there. So when the chute flight tracks come across, they're going to be 130 feet closer to my house than they are now. which concerns me. So I'm looking for options that would not include shoe-fly tracks. Also, I don't really have a desire to have a Berlin Wall bisect our city, or a portion of it, or and my neighbors will be affected negatively. I don't know that that ship may have sailed, but I'm asking for consideration there and options if possible. I have concerns about long construction disruptions, nighttime noise. We suffered a lot with electrification and the positive train control systems, where we didn't sleep for years on end, from flashing lights, backup beeping horns from backup of heavy vehicles, and that was, we didn't sleep for many years because of that. Now with the new electrification, we see that there's a lot more noise. There's a lot of rail screech that replaced the rumble of the old diesel electrics. When the trains move faster, they kick up more dust. Our house is full of dust now, rather than diesel particulates. So it's better, but it was a trade-off. With the horizontal adjustments, is there a way to mitigate rail to wheel screech? Because the frequency it's like a dentist drill in a certain way. It's unpleasant as that. And I'm asking for a pretty good holistic analysis of impacts to residents during construction. What mitigations would be provided to us, or compensation for the disruption? Would we be rehoused somewhere else if we can't sleep? And my last question would be, find it, I guess. I want to thank you for the presentation again. It was a really terrific thing. I learned a lot today.
Right. I think we had most of our questions asked. Ed?
Oh, Chair,
Yeah.
one moment. We do have another request to speak.
Okay.
Our next speaker is Roland online. Roland, you now have permission to unmute yourself.
Good afternoon. I'd say actually, this picture there, that's Diridan. But this essentially would be the same as a viaduct. So let me quickly go through two things. It's number one, a viaduct does not require shoe flies. If it did, it would be impossible to build Diridan using this construction technique. And it also does not introduce a Berlin Wall. It actually, you don't see it here. It introduces some really elegant arches, not some concrete monstrosity. I'd be happy to introduce you to people who not only have designed this, but have actually built this, and you may find that the costs are competitive. And my closing comment is about this box jacking, which quite frankly, you have to be honest, it is not viable in your consideration, in your particular configuration, because you don't have the depth. And the way this is done in the UK is through a 3-day weekend closure. Let's say, for the sake of argument, Thanksgiving or maybe Christmas, but Christmas is not desirable. And essentially what you do is you take everything down, the tracks and everything, you jack the precast structure into place. Actually, in the UK, I got an example. They use self-propelled modular transporter, SPMT, and this thing weighed, I think, like 250 tons, something like that. And move it into place, and then you rebuild everything. And this literally can be done in 3 days if you know what you're doing. Thank you.
Okay. All right, thanks. Ed?
Yeah. With all sincere humility, I would say some of the committee members are now up to speed on full physics. I tried to avoid that class in high school and ever since. But I think the presentation was fantastic, just speaking from one audience member. But the thing that keeps troubling me from when I read it, from and going through this, is when we talk about this, Meadow and Charleston delivered together I'm just trying to figure out how that can possibly work. And I understand where we are on 15%, shoe fly, et cetera. But you come down to saying things like, where feasible, either Charleston or Meadow would remain open to traffic. Well, that to me sounds like a confusion, disaster for, unless it was like, these 2 weeks or this month, I mean, it couldn't be every other day. So I guess I'd like, not necessarily today, but sort of more detail on that. And I'm just wondering if we're sort of biting off more we can chew there and just say, look, it's got to be one. One will be closed for a year and a half. Two can't ever be closed totally because, wow, then we got real problems. We just did an analysis of Churchill closed temporarily. To close both of those, that just wouldn't work. So I don't know if this. I'm not trying to necessarily change your game plan here. I'm just saying I don't see how this becomes practical. And in any case, the other thing I was going to bring up, which actually you just brought up, and this is, I think, on us, not on your estimates, but at some point we have to think if it's better to close down for a month or something like that, then we should look at accommodating those folks that are sitting there listening to that for a month and saying, you get to go to the motel down the street. I mean, that, again, that's on us. That's not on you, but I think that is something that we need to consider in our sort of cost estimates, because this will be horrendous for a long period of time. So those are just sort of my 2 comments at this point.
Yeah, I was going to say that is exactly why we are digging more and more into the construction sequencing as to whether the roadway should go first prior to the railroad, the roadway bridge over Alma.
Yeah, that's very wise. Thanks for reemphasizing.
That's one of just we're exploring it. We're also trying to understand that if there was simultaneous closure, unlikely because we know that that's going to be quite challenging. How to be able to gain the most benefit for such a disruption. What does it unlock effectively? That would be the question. We are going to be exploring this summer the first iteration of construction period traffic based on the construction sequencing. So we will be delving more and more as to the diversion of traffic, the ability to how much traffic can be accommodated. Is there a traffic management plan that may be necessary for these projects to be able to help individuals that may not reside in Palo Alto but travel through Palo Alto to be able to utilize different routes. So that's going to be something that we'll begin exploring this summer.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I have questions along the same vein, particularly in light of the item we heard prior to this, which is we're going from intersections that are already pretty poorly graded and are going to be reduced further on the traffic side due to improvements made for bikes and peds. So that's going to happen. So we already have Meadow, I think, going to an F. And that's before there's any construction, any impacts from Charleston being closed. And so just want to be sure that these conversations are all happening in tandem. And so, and how low can we go? Is it G? Is it H? Is it I? Is it J? Like how bad is it going to get? Living on that side of town, just trying to figure out like there's a whole quadrant that's going to be impacted by the inability to, I mean, more than a quadrant, but looking forward to hearing more information on that.
And one other consideration that we'll have is, might we have the new bike and ped undercrossing in the vicinity of Matadero Creek before we go into this construction, which would provide 2 potential benefits. One is just the being able to divert a portion of the bike and ped movements to that location so they wouldn't have to go through the construction site. The other is any benefit overall to traffic pattern as a result of mode shift from commuters to the research park and things, then having a real viable route, especially if we had that Chamales bike path. But that remains to be determined. So I think that, Nadia?
So just wondering, have you guys made any contact with the Long Island Railroad folks, and are there tips on the box jacking that we could learn from?
Yes. The Caltrain management has had not only, I think, at the initial meeting with the project management team for Long Island Railroad, we have been consulting box jacking and shoe flight contractors to be able to understand some of the key challenges that they've experienced in other locations, and along with the design team and the integrated team's experience of where we've done similar types of construction. Long Island Railroad in particular was fairly complex. That's high ridership, high frequency,
And freight.
and freight. It is an electrified railroad, although in that case, it's a third rail, not overhead catenary, which was a bit to their benefit in this case. But they were able to do 9 separations with 5 closures to the service on weekends. Now, there's some really unique roadway conditions in that area that they were able to take advantage of. In this case, I would say almost probably the highest constraint and complexity to the construction of these separations. Very few high frequency corridors have essentially a high capacity and high speed in some cases from vehicles on Alma Street. So that's the challenge that we're up against, is the Alma Street in particular.
And as part of your next analysis, will you be coming with impacts of that speed if we were, say, to consider reducing speed on Alma? How beneficial might that be? Is that something you'll be considering?
I think it wouldn't necessarily be an immediate benefit to the projects themselves, but I would say it's likely a benefit for the community based on observations in the area, especially along Seal Avenue. Seal Avenue being proposed as a pedestrian bike crossing, and that access at Seal and Alma, the ability to be able to ameliorate those speeds would be of benefit to that crossing.
Okay.
I wanted to ask about the when the XCAP was looking at this, one of the main ideas was this context-sensitive solutions and the possibility of finding other buckets of funding to be able to help with the project. So I would encourage you, with all of the utility relocation, to look at even federal programs, any programs that is improving our sewer system, or lights, or fiber to the premises, or any place where we can bundle as much as possible and potentially get funding, obviously would be great. So just throwing that out there. I'm sure you guys have thought of that. I had the same question about the Loma Verde bike crossing and how that timing goes together. Was wondering whether the utility exploration at Meadow might also help elucidate what Councilmember Lifcott-Hames was asking about Meadow, and whether an underpass would have been better. I think that there's a big piece of equipment there, which actually made it worse, but that you don't need to answer. I'm just throwing out my list of questions for you, but you know what I'm talking about. So, and then I guess for the Caltrain board, wondering about how you guys might consider changes in railroad operations that might help the cost of grade separation. So both passenger and freight operations, just changing the schedule as we get to work windows. You might eliminate the midnight train and the 2 a.m. freight train, or change the window when that can happen. And that could greatly decrease not only our work windows, but the work windows of all the projects along the corridor. Similarly, wondering if the Caltrain board should have a master list of all grade separation projects and their anticipated timeline, because if they all line up more or less around the same times, then looking at those operations might actually have an even greater reduction in cost than it might have if they were kind of spread out. So you'd probably want to have a running clock at the Caltrain board level. Was going to suggest that the width discussion that Councilmember Burt mentioned, in terms of like, are you building the berm, the width size, again, goes into Caltrain policies that he talked about. The outreach meeting that you want to have in late August, early September, just be super coordinating with the schools, because there's just a lot of stuff happening during that time, so extra messaging. At some point, sound walls were talked about when we had elevated things, and I'm wondering how that might impact the screechy sound that has been mentioned, and we might want to think about. I know that most of the sound comes off the wheels, and there was discussions about how a very short wall of only about a foot near the wheel well could actually help with some of the sound, so that might be something the neighbors would appreciate. when you look at the traffic management plan for constructability, as you know, my favorite topic is what happens to the lights on El Camino. So I will just throw that out there once again. And then are there any improvements in Mountain View that might be happening that might also help us when we look at construction management traffic and that whole plan? Because that traffic isn't just Palo Alto traffic, it's Mountain View traffic, and we should think about how things that might be happening in their city that I know you guys are, I think, also working in Mountain View, so there's a benefit to that, but just having better coordination across city lines on those issues might be super helpful. And obviously same with Menlo Park and San Mateo County. So that's it.
One thing to add, if I may, to Nadia's point about the community meetings in August, I think last time it felt as if it was either one was in the daytime, one was at night, and Churchill was at night, and Charleston and Meadow were together in the day, and it just didn't feel equitable. Charleston and Meadow are two separate projects, even though they're a quarter mile apart. There's more complexity when you discuss them because it's two very different things, even though there is much that we then discuss about them together. So I urge you not to treat it as half at Churchill, Charleston Meadow, right? Give Charleston Meadow, people interested in that discussion, give them the time they need to properly understand what's going on. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you all, and thanks for hanging in an extra 15 minutes. That's very valuable. And I think that concludes our meeting. Great. Thanks.